Hi, I'm Gina Wagers, and this is Module 1, discussing and talking about fiscal responsibilities of the school principal. First and foremost, one of the most important things when you're thinking about the financial responsibilities of a building administrator is what you need to know, including what resources the central office might buy and manage versus which resources are under your control, and then if there are spending items that have to be approved even within your building budget that you're using. And typically, there are a couple different models here for how districts like to break that spending down as far as how much control building admin might have over their budgets. So there's site or school-based management, which gives some level of autonomy to those site leaders in that budgeting process so that they can make decisions at more of that local school level based on numbers and needs of that individual school. And then more centrally managed resources is more of a model where there's more consistency across the district from school to school about certain parts of the budget or certain spending, especially when it comes to a district that wants to have more consistency from building to building with curriculum and things like that. Usually, centrally managed resources tend to be more efficient and cost effective because there aren't as many people managing different aspects of that budget. It's all kind of centralized depending on the scale of the district. Another important thing to consider as you're thinking about the financial responsibilities of the building administrator is how those decisions are going to be made. So thinking first and foremost about the building and its needs and connecting all of the spending to the strategic plan is not only in the school, students, and staff's best interest, but it's just good financial practice because you know you're going to be managing money and you're going to have spending that's tied to specific goals meant to improve the overall school and its performance. Stakeholder feedback is an important part of making data-informed decisions when it comes to school monies as well. Teaching staff and building capacity in them with how the money in the school is managed helps them to make smaller financial decisions within their classrooms as far as materials and resources and things they need that allow the principal to then plan for bigger spending items that the building might need, like professional development for staff. So knowing their needs helps to manage those things. And then just getting feedback on, like I said, what those needs are. And then another important piece of that is reporting on and reviewing the school's finances, having transparency in those budgets, what's being spent and what it's being spent on. And then maintaining that document is something that is living and ongoing because, again, just like your improvement plan, those budgets need to be updated and numbers might fluctuate depending on, factors like enrollment and stuff. So that's really an important piece of understanding how you're going to budget, but then how you're also going to track the effectiveness of your budget based on the other data that your building is collecting, like student progress data and stuff like that. Financial spending is also really important to think about student and adult success and well-being. Again, thinking about how all of the spending that you're going to be doing and everything that you're budgeting for, tying back to your building needs and those goals, it's going to support students and facilitate better academic progress. It's going to ensure the smooth operation of the building for the staff and the students. It also helps building leaders to provide and plan for professional development opportunities that support the academic progress of students. And as far as the larger school community and families, it helps to meet needs and really opens the door to connecting with the community, especially when you're trying to look at innovative programming and different opportunities within your school. Another key aspect of building budgeting is thinking about how you're going to distribute funds and how certain funds can be spent or what they can be spent on. Knowing those compliance policies, not just at the district or local level, but then at the state and federal levels as well. Thinking about like special education funding and how and when that can be used. Title I and at-risk funding have certain stipulations too, especially when it comes to things like curriculum and resources. I know the state of Kansas puts out their list every year as far as at-risk funding and certain programs that are approved to be paid through those. So that's, I know at my building at least, causing us to have to kind of plan ahead for the next few years because we have currently some programming and curriculum that we purchase through some of that at-risk funding as an alternative school that is no longer on the approved list for the state. So we are looking at other options as far as budgeting and where those funds would come from, or if we need to change curriculums and resources like that. When you're thinking about planning too, for your budget, thinking about equity, not just what the building needs or what certain groups within the building needs, is really important. Asking questions like, who is the spending going to benefit? Is it helping to meet these building goals? Is it increasing access and inclusion within the building? And then again, just knowing the finance laws, policies, and regulations at all of the various levels between the district and local and state and federal. Understanding teacher salaries and how those pay schedules work. So as you're hiring for positions, you understand what needs to be approved or what's allotted for certain buildings. And then, of course, because failure to comply with some of those things can result in pretty serious consequences. Keeping and maintaining the accounts is an important part of that. Knowing what aspects of record keeping you're responsible for at a building level is important. I know in the district that I work in, at our building, we do have like a building credit card that is tied to part of our building budget. And so I know aspects of how that has to be managed when teachers want something purchased and that is used, getting those itemized receipts, and then who manages that and where it's kept in our building. And then knowing and following budget deadlines is very important, because if you have to present your budget or you have to have certain aspects of your budget finalized and submitted by certain dates, obviously maintaining those is important in order to receive that funding. Also, another key part that I think is really important, especially at more of a local level, is understanding policies, especially like any board policies that your district might have on fundraising or donations or receiving gifts for the school. I know our district has a pretty strong policy as far as the amounts and types of donations that individual classroom teachers can receive from different sources. So knowing those is important. A lot of those, like fundraising, are great opportunities that can provide additional funding and opportunities for school growth and programs and stuff, but knowing the guidelines for how to use those funds is just as important as having access to the funds. And then thinking about the different school funding sources, even at just the building level, knowing the difference between like your operational funding and more of what's in your building budget and what that covers versus more of what the centralized district office might be paying for or already have allotted for the building is good to know, because then you can communicate accurate information to your staff as far as if they do have a need come up and they would like something purchased. It's a little bit easier to navigate knowing where that needs to come from and how you're going to budget for that. So again, knowing the difference between those types of funding and where they come from, whether it's something that is school funding costs like property maintenance, classroom materials, things like that, professional development versus salaries or other things like that. And then how those are calculated or divvied up. I know in our building, it's a little bit unique because we are a separate building in our district, but we don't have our own school code because we have students from several other buildings in our district. And as the alternative program, we're not a separate building code in our district yet. So our budget is kind of based on an approximation of the percentages of the budgets from the other buildings. So we kind of have our building budget based on the students that come to us from the other buildings. So it's a little bit trickier to navigate, I think, than maybe some other buildings that have kind of a set code and assigned number of students to them, because our enrollment tends to fluctuate. References. I think this assignment was really relevant to my learning because obviously building leaders have to understand the financial landscape of their building, where money comes from, how it needs to be spent, all of the ins and outs of maintaining that budget. Also, this assignment really improved my understanding of the different models of budgeting within districts and knowing the different guidelines just for receiving and spending those funds based on their source as well. I think also just understanding that this is part of an ongoing process for a building leader and a responsibility for a building leader in order to support the bigger goals of the building. And just personally, I think this assignment and this knowledge in particular will help me because it has really helped me reflect on some of the specific aspects that I do know about our building's unique situation and the way we have our budget set up right now. I think also knowing those things kind of raises a concern for how to build capacity and teach staff about those processes so that they can help support the building leader in being responsible spenders and knowledgeable about different funding is important, but also maybe quite challenging, depending on what kind of building you're working in or the scale of your building, and what kind of staff you have.